Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. So, the Premier League transfer window opened on Friday, and I thought, why not have a look at the state of play across the entire Tottenham squad, Tottenham transfer window, and where we're at and what's to come, hopefully. Obviously, I will not know every single thing that is about to happen in this transfer window, but I'm going to try and pack as much into this video as possible of potential players that Spurs like, various positions, things like that. And then we'll see where we go. Like I say, it is not an exhaustive list. Exhaustive list? Already struggling with my words, which is not a good sign. But you know what I mean. Hopefully, this will give you as many potential names as possible that I know the club like. And then there will be ones that come out of left field that surprise us a little bit, or opportunities that arise. Because I know people like to hold me to my word. They certainly do. We'll have a little chat about that and certain things as well to come. So yes, transfer window open on Friday. Spurs obviously already signed 2 players before that transfer window was opened. I noticed the mood is starting to turn from, isn't it great we've signed 2 players before the transfer window's opened, to now, but they were just free transfers. Where's the ambition? It's like, calm down. it's like, not many clubs have really made any big transfers. I think probably Villa have been the most active so far. I think Spurs have done okay so far. And there is more to come. There's lots more to come. But yes. And the other thing that is happening behind the scenes as well that Fabio Paratici is doing is he's bringing in a new man behind the scenes. Rangers chief scout Andy Scolding. He's London-born, but he is Rangers chief scout, and he's very highly regarded. Coming across to Spurs, there's some discussion over what his title is going to be. It will be a newly created position. It's going to have elements of what Steve Hitchen did, who used to be the technical performance director, but also kind of its own thing as well. I think there's probably going to need to be another person that comes in as well to fill that kind of... Because if you weren't aware, Steve Hitchen's role was quite an all-encompassing one. He was technical performance director, but essentially before Paratici came, he'd kind of become like a director of football. He was in charge of so much recruitment side of things, scouting, performance, youth recruitment, first team, youth team. It was a big role. So Paratici came in, obviously, he's even a higher role. It's a managing director of football. So when Steve Hitchen left or resigned in February, he's still on gardening leave, but he resigned in February. So when he headed off, essentially there was this quite a big void in things that needed to be done. Because while his role had shrunk with Paratici's arrival, it still was a lot of youth side to it. There was still a lot of behind the scenes things. I mean, he and Paratici together were going and appraising every single department within the football side of the club and improving it. And they'd been given a bigger budget by Daniel Levy, and they were improving lots of things. So his role was quite a big one. So Andy Scolding's going to come in. He's going to do elements of it. It's not going to be the same role, but he'll do elements of that job and also other things that he'll bring. He's a recruitment specialist himself and made some really good kind of signings for Rangers. Very good at scouting the British game, and that's for me is going to be what's key with him in terms of with Hitchen going. I know people had their different views on Steve Hitchen. A lot of it probably formed from one out of context line in the Amazon documentary, but he's pretty well respected in the game. And when his gardening leave is up towards the end of this year, there's a lot of Premier League clubs and clubs from abroad that I understand are probably going to come in and have a little fight to see if they can get him to their club. So, what he did bring to Tottenham, especially after the arrival of Paratici in that early months, was that kind of the British balance as well. Because Spurs, over the years, I'd say, haven't been the greatest at bringing in those British players. I was trying to think about it recently, and I was looking back, and Alfie Devine obviously was a success at youth level. It hopefully will go on to be a huge success as a player. Very, very talented. But then I was looking at it. I've written them down here because I was struggling to find more. Joe Hart, Ryan Sessegnon, Jack Clark, obviously Joe Rodon. that's probably about it. Obviously, Fraser Forster now, but of that bunch in recent years, and probably you'd say Joe Rodon likely to move this summer. Joe Hart's already left. Jack Clark obviously can't really break into the first team. Ryan Sessegnon has had his injuries. Maybe he'll be the one that does it. Obviously had a good end to the season. So in terms of British players, Spurs just haven't really pushed through on things. Like, I think I've said this before, James Ward-Prowse, they'd agreed a deal for him pretty much 3 years ago. Didn't pull the trigger on it. 3 years on, he's been touted as a £75 million player. Jack Grealish, we all know what happened there. That was all but done. Spurs just had to pay the money. I think it was about 24 million, something like that. Grealish thought he was coming. Spurs didn't push it through. Villa got their new money in new investors. Grealish stayed. Now he's a £100 million player winning the league with Manchester City. And this has been their thing. Spurs have always, the recruitment side of things, they've always had those players there for some reason, whether it's Daniel Levy, whether it's someone in the hierarchy that isn't just pushing the button, pressing the green button, the green light, the button, you know what I mean? Not actually doing it. And that's been something that Spurs have lacked. And perhaps with Andy Scolding coming in, and Paratici hopefully trusting him as he's been part of this process of bringing him in, we'll get a better kind of sense of, or a better influx of British players, because Tottenham need them. We're going to talk about it when we talk about each department of the squad. These homegrown players, they're heading out the door, so they need to replace them. They do. Let's see what he brings. I think it'll be later this summer he's going to come in. Hopefully, by the sounds of it, from everything I'm hearing about him, doing lots of digging around in the game, and he seems to be very well regarded. So that's good. Good for Tottenham. Good for Tottenham indeed. Like I said, let's crack into the squad itself. Let's break down each position, see what's happened at Spurs, and what players that they like and want to bring in. Some of the players they like and want to bring in. So, goalkeeper. Obviously, that's probably the most settled part of the squad now, isn't it? Obviously, with Hugo Lloris signing his new deal until 2024. We know that that's had its one change, which is Pierluigi Golini has headed off back to Atalanta. Although I don't think he still hasn't kind of said his goodbyes on social media or anything like that. Maybe very well because he's on Italy duty. He has headed back. Spurs have said that that's not happening, and Fraser Forster has come in. That's now been announced. So that's all different. And then you've got the third in line is going to be probably Brandon Austin at this point. Alfie Whiteman's away on loan at Degerfors in Sweden. Be interesting one with him because his contract comes to an end next summer. So, it'd be interesting to see what Spurs do with him. Obviously, I think I said in the last video or the one before, got rid of 5 goalkeepers this summer. The various contracts have come to an end. So, whether Whiteman goes as well or whether they look to extend that and then loan him out again, I don't know. But at the moment, it would be Brandon Austin who's third choice. I wouldn't be surprised if Spurs do just keep looking out for a bargain in case there's anything there to be had for a future potential heir to Lloris. Because let's be honest, Fraser Forster isn't really coming in to do that. I think is he older or the same age as Lloris? Oh no, so I think he's slightly younger than Lloris. He's not likely to be his successor. So Spurs will have to start looking towards that. But obviously at the moment, with the homegrown things, having Austin and Forster, that's 2 homegrown people. It's always kind of bewildered me that Spurs' backup keeper has been a foreign keeper because you are automatically taking another foreign player spot. But hey, I don't make the recruitment decisions. So that's it. I think goalkeeper is pretty much it's sorted right now, isn't it? Like I say, they'll keep an eye out in case there's someone that they really just have to buy because they think in the future this young goalkeeper could be Lloris's heir. Maybe they loan him out straight away. I don't know. But in terms of that department, pretty settled, ready to crack on with the season. So we go to wing-backs, and obviously we know that there's a name here that is of great interest to Tottenham, and that is Jed Spence. So, Jed Spence, if you weren't aware, if you've missed all of this, absolute breakout star for Nottingham Forest this season. Middlesbrough loaned him out because it wasn't really in favour there, and ironically, he went off to Forest and was huge, brilliant, great part of their season. Helped them to the playoffs, helped them get promoted back to the Premier League, and now there's a bit of a fight to get his services because he's only 21 years old, England under-21 international, very talented. It's caught the eye of clubs across Europe as well as England. So, as I've said this before, Spurs among the front runners. You've got Borussia Dortmund like him as well, Roma like him, Newcastle, Brentford, and of course Forest like him as well. Look, there was a lot of excitement. Was it yesterday? Maybe the day before? Possibly Friday, I think it was. Of everyone. Spurs have agreed a fee. It's done. Advanced talks. Way. And I had to do that thing of coming in and saying, no, not yet. Not yet. We're not there yet. And, reports that a fee have been agreed, wide of the mark. And I don't even think they're at an advanced stage yet. What I've been told is that things are expected to develop early this week. I think I said was it Friday? I did a report possibly that said maybe the next 72 hours or so there was going to be development. So early this coming week, Monday, Tuesday, I think we'll see things start to kick on. And it's really interesting, the reaction. I just find it fascinating the way people react. So there are 3 different ways people react when I say, hold on, it's not there yet, calm down, kind of thing. There are 3 different reactions. One is, okay, fair enough. And that's probably the reaction you'd get from the man or person, woman on the street if you were talking about Tottenham. It'd be, okay, it's not done there yet. Twitter also gives you 2 other reactions. The second one is, you're so negative. And it's like, one guy yesterday, it was really funny, he was going, come on, be positive over signings. It's like, do you want me to lie to you? It's like, I can. It wouldn't do me or you any good. That one I find really fascinating, mainly because I think I've been really positive as well. I've been really enjoying Spurs, the whole Conte era. It's all exciting and there's money to spend in the transfer window. I'm properly buzzing about this transfer window. So I'd actually say negative. I'm really surprised at that one. And the third one, which is the one that probably makes me laugh the most, is people go, I was just saying what Tottenham telling him to say. So that's a funny one. And the reason that makes me chuckle is because it's not how journalism works. It's not. It's not how it works at all. I'm not, without being disrespectful to younger journalists, I'm not some work experience kid that has just rocked up and started covering the club. You guys know, anyone that watches my stuff or whatever will know very well my rule. My rule is 2 sources. Always to try and get at least 2 sources to confirm something. I would say that 90% of things that I write about or information I get come initially from outside the club. Like I say, I'm not a newcomer. I've been covering the club for 6 years. Been a journalist next year for 20 years, which is scary in itself and makes me feel very old. So I've built up a very decent amount of contacts. I know lots of agents, management company of various players. I know lots of family and friends of players and things like that. I know people involved in football in different ways and people involved in different clubs and things like that. So I always found that quite funny. It's like, I don't know, there's this idea that maybe the journalists that cover Spurs, they're only told to say what the club told them to say. It really doesn't work like that. Even I'd say, when I talk about people within the club that I'm talking to, that's not like Spurs press or PR people. Once in a while, if there's something, what would it maybe be over? Maybe something quite general. Maybe just confirmation of a timing over something, like a new contract that's about to be announced, or things that it's more general stuff. That's maybe when you go and you get that second source or second confirmation from the club in that respect. But mostly, when I say within the club, it's different people within the club who don't have much of an interest on whether it's spun in any way, I suppose is the best way to put it. And also, I'm quite a cynical older journalist. If anything's been spun, I'm pretty much will know that it's being spun and things like that. But like I say, I think the key is that the bulk of the info that comes in, and this is, I'm talking about myself, and I'm actually talking to journalists in general, comes from elsewhere. It comes from agents, managers, PR people for players, friends, family of players, everything. If we're doing our jobs correctly, which there are so many terrific journalists out there, we are speaking to everyone involved. If there's a transfer deal, we're looking at both sides of it. Well, technically there's three parties, isn't there? There's the club that want to buy, the club that may or may not want to sell, and then there is the player themselves. And we go to every part of that. So I must admit, it always makes me chuckle a little bit when they say, "He's telling him what the club's telling him to say." No, the club aren't probably interested in what I say whatsoever. The only times they'll be interested if I say something that really annoys them and they get upset about it. That's probably, and that is, to be fair, that's quite rare. I used to get, in my first season, I got a few tellings off, but I don't really so much anymore. I think, though, that that's a sign of maybe Spurs growing as a bigger club. I think when clubs are a little bit, not small time, that's not the way to say it, but when they're a little bit kind of lower down the ladder, every little bit of news that goes out there is quite important. It's quite important. They're very bothered about how they're reflected, any negative press, things like that. But I do think when they hit the big time, when they reach the elite, there's less of a caring what people say about you, unless it's something really awful, absolutely a terrible stain upon, a slur upon the club kind of thing. But I think that's more of a big club mentality. So yeah, it doesn't work like that. But I found it funny because I saw a couple of those after the Jed Spence things, and I get it. People want transfers. Of course they do. I want transfers, and I get that. I get when people really do. They take it to heart. It's almost like he's just trying to play down our expectations, and it's like, well, no. Because the Jed Spence thing, I reported that. And yes, there were other outlets that were saying it was done, it was almost done, it was advanced, whatever. And yes, I was saying, hold yourself, it's not really. And then obviously the Middlesbrough journalists started to really start digging around their end. And of course, then you started to see the stories, I think yesterday, from the Middlesbrough reporters saying, there's nobody's made a serious bid, and there's no advanced talks with any clubs over Jed Spence. And that's what it is. It's like, you can choose who to believe, of course you can, and that's absolutely your right. And all journalists, like I've always said, things will change with your information. So something you say 24 hours at one point, 24 hours later, can seem wrong because circumstances change. And that could be the same with Jed Spence. Quite frankly, I could have said nothing expected. Well, develops within 72 hours, nothing right now. And within 24 hours, maybe Spurs would have made a decent-sized bid. And everyone would maybe go back to the original tweet and go, I was like, well, no, because it's at that time. But there you go. So yeah, sorry. I just like to explain that because I do find that always really interesting. Just to try and give people a little insight into how journalism works, and hopefully that's what I try and do with these videos. But yeah, back to Jed Spence himself. Developments are expected on his future, maybe Monday, Tuesday, early this week at least, is what is expected. And it's not just Spurs, or other clubs want him as well. I should stress this. There was also the whole Twitter thing. When a player isn't in an international squad, Twitter goes, whoa, he's joining. That wasn't what it was. England under-21s, who was being rested for their match against Kosovo, but he was still out there in Kosovo. He travelled with the squad, and I think they got a home match against Slovenia tomorrow night, which he should be available for again. And then, like I say, when he's away from that England duty, I think everything starts to kick on. This international break, speaking to a few agents this week of various different players, and they're all saying the same thing. It's the international break just puts a pause on everything. Everyone's kind of, there's this idea of you can talk loosely about things, but ultimately until the player is in play, as in ready to properly sit down and discuss stuff, doesn't really, it just holds things up. And I don't think anyone's really enjoyed this international break. I mean, I didn't even watch the England match last night. I headed off to watch Jurassic World Dominion, which it's better than the reviews say. It's all right. It's all right. It's not a masterpiece, but it's got some cool moments, and the original cast are brilliant. But anyway, this isn't a movie review thing. Jed Spence. Said this before, Pratic's watched him in person, really likes him. He and Conte think as a homegrown option, he's perfect for that role. Likely to be him and Doherty, you'd imagine. Emerson Royale attracting interest back in the Liga. Doesn't fit the wing-back role, as I've said in the past. Understand Spence is interested or attracted by the prospect of Champions League football. I think maybe Forest slightly dropping out of the race. It almost feels like from the Forest end there's an understanding of that as well. He doesn't want to go to a big club and get loaned out. I've said that in the past. But Champions League football, both Spurs and Dortmund can offer that. So I think that's a big tick in their favour, as it were. So fingers crossed on him. I'm going to give you some of the stats for why I just think he's exactly what Conte needs. And Conte improves players. Don't forget this. Conte likes a player that he can see can raise their ceiling hugely. So Spence was in the PFA Championship Team of the Year. 6 foot tall. He's not a small wing back. He's a big lad. Loves to get forward. I've got all the stats here. You ready for the stat attack? He completed more dribbles, 74 of them, than any other defender in the Championship over the season. He attempted 169 dribbles in all. He also made 44 key passes as a defender from 42 appearances. And the fact that he only registered... People keep going on about his assists. He only registered 4 assists. 44 key passes. That's not down to him. That's down to the profligacy of the Forest attackers not putting the ball away. He is providing those key passes. He's putting in the crosses and the short passes as well. He's not scared of having a shot. He's had 24 shots this season. I think it was 17 from outside the box. So that is an area he needs to improve, though, because he only scored 3 goals, which isn't awful for a wing-back. But with the Conte system, one wing-back to the other wing-back, crosses in, being at the back post, ready to knock it in, he'll want more from that. So that is definitely an area he can improve on. Defensively as well, very good. 62 successful tackles from 82 attempts. And that's bearing in mind, he's quite high up the flank as well. So he's having to chase back a lot of the time, he will be. Despite that advanced position as well, he was only dribbled past 20 times in those 42 Championship matches, which is pretty good when you really work that out and break that down. Made 66 interceptions, blocked 23 crosses, blocked 42 passes, and blocked 8 shots and made 58 clearances. It's also worth noting in the FA Cup, he played 3 Premier League sides, Arsenal, Leicester and Liverpool. Man of the match against Arsenal, scored a cracker and was very good against Leicester. And in Liverpool, much changed Liverpool side, but obviously they kept him to the single goal. It was only 1-0. And funnily enough, I was talking to an Arsenal fan. It's a very nice chap that I know today. And he was saying about just how good Jed Spence was against them. He was superb. He said, what did he say? He said something about Martinelli had been really in a good bit of form and was like tearing people apart down that flank. And Spence apparently did completely the other way, and they just couldn't handle him. Very exciting player. He really is. I've seen a lot of people kind of almost turning their nose up him because he hasn't got this foreign-sounding name. He's not from another country. No, Spurs need homegrown players, and he is right up there as one of the top young talents that's coming through. Sometimes it takes this kind of breakthrough season for someone to really develop. And I think we're going to talk about him later, but I think we're seeing it with Troy Parrott is really coming on as well. You just need a season to go your way and really develop. Skippy at Norwich. There's one guy, every time I mention Skippy, he goes, I saw when you tried to mention Skip again. You brought him in every time. And I will talk about him because he's class. But he did. He also had that season at Norwich where, boom, it just suddenly pushed him on. And I think we've seen that with Spence. Obviously we said about McDoherty and Emerson and what happens there. Look, let's say if Spence does pick elsewhere, let's say if he picks Dortmund or another Premier League club suddenly come in, Newcastle got Trippier. I don't know quite how much. Spurs, from what I understand, can offer him regular football. He will play regularly at Spurs. There'll be lots of games next season, and he will get the chance to fight for that spot. But if he were to go elsewhere, look, I think Spurs have always kept an eye on always. In the last, he's only young, so not always, but not sounds like he's some 10-year-old. But Wilfried Singo plays for Torino. I've mentioned him before. He's 21-year-old. He's a kind of up-and-coming wing-back in Serie A. So, it might be worth keeping an eye on him. Maybe keep an eye on, obviously. This is a very different situation, but Achraf Hakimi at PSG, I'd say purely for the Conte angle. Him and Conte did good things together at Inter. Improved him a lot. I think they've both said that. The thing with Hakimi, he's very expensive, he'll be. And from what I understand from recent reports, I think he's actually happy at PSG. There was some suggestion he wasn't, but I think recent. So, again, before the aggregator accounts or anyone starts putting out, Alistair Gold says Hakimi's coming to Tottenham. I'm not. I'm saying that's probably a less likely thing, but just one where, if someone has a chance of bringing him, you'd think Conte would be able to kind of help sway that if Spurs were to pay the money. But like I say, I think Jed Spence appears to be the one that Spurs want. And it's about, I guess, pushing that one over the line. And I think there'll be some haggling over the fee. I'm sure there's some talk that potentially Middlesbrough want a little bit more than's being quoted out there. We'll see how that works. And obviously, Spurs will believe that he has a certain value. And we'll see how that one goes. On the left, pretty much overstocked now with even Perisic coming in. Perisic, Sessegnon, obviously Reguilon. I still think Reguilon will probably move on this summer if they can get a decent offer for him. There was some talk this week maybe of Juventus actually sniffing around. But yeah, I think of the three, Conte really likes Sessegnon. Funnily enough, he's probably been working out. If you haven't seen his Instagram stuff, he's got his personal performance coach that he's been working with, I think out on holiday. He's had his bit of rest when he was pulled out of the England under-21 squad, and now you can see it's a lot of work clearly on strengthening those legs. They want to make sure those hamstrings are absolutely ready for the gruelling Conte pre-season to come. But then you've also got Ben Davies as well, who can fill in that left wing-back slot if required. So I find it interesting. There's still links to other left wing-backs, which means probably one of either two things, which means either, like I've said before, Paratici works on up to 10 different deals for each position, and there may be some that still, there's lingering news coming from because they were players that he was also looking at if they couldn't get Perisic. That's one aspect. The other aspect is if maybe Spurs decide, maybe we push Perisic further up. Maybe we play him more regularly in a more advanced role, and then we do bring in another left wing back because there's a really good deal out there to be had. Personally, I think Perisic being so good as a left wing back in the last couple of seasons, I think it would be surprising to play him elsewhere, unless they suddenly decide that the Premier League might be a little bit faster paced for him. But, well, we'll see. We'll see if anything comes of those. But I don't think it makes much sense at the moment, unless that's the thinking. And obviously, with Reguilon, I said before, I think the £28 million has to be started to be paid this summer for him, for his deal, which obviously Spurs would be able to offset if they move him on. Right, so that's wing-backs. We've covered wing-backs, we've covered goalkeepers. Next is centre-backs. Obviously, we know one certain centre-back has been dominating the news recently, and for Spurs, and that's Alessandro Bastoni. If you've completely missed the last week, his agent, what was his name? I've written it down because Tullio Tinti. Tullio Tinti came out of a meeting with the Inter hierarchy a few days back and said, essentially, he's not leaving Inter Milan. I can tell you that he won't be leaving. Look, I've said this before and I'll repeat it again. Spurs will continue to monitor the situation with Bastoni. He is a player that Conte loves. He really likes Conte as well, although he doesn't really want to leave Inter right now. He's not sure if it's the right time. Spurs will continue to monitor the situation because just purely Inter presumably have told his agent, look, there are other players we want to sell. We want to keep Bastoni, which is understandable. He's 23 years old, Italy international. He's class, and he could be absolutely world class. However, Spurs will keep an eye on it purely because of the fact that this Inter are struggling to move on other players for the kind of fees they want, or they want to bring in. We know they want to bring in Lukaku. They want to bring in Dybala. Sorry, someone told me off for saying Dybala. And obviously there's the whole Lautaro Martinez thing as well, which we'll come to a little bit later. So if they can't get, let's say, a Skriniar off the books, or other players, let's talk about Dumfries maybe moving on, a right back that Spurs have looked at in the past as well. But if they can't move them on, and then Spurs might sense, well, if we slap a big bid in, maybe a little bit more than they were expecting, maybe they start to get tempted, and then they start to say to Bastoni, well, actually, so maybe that's something that happens. For me, I don't know if Spurs can hang around to wait for that this summer. I think they need to start getting Conte's squad in order for him for pre-season. I personally, who am I? But I personally wouldn't probably hang around for players unless Conte specifically says, okay, we can wait for that. Otherwise, I think you start looking at the other ones. I said before, Josko Gvardiol is the other one right at the top of their list. Gvardiol, I think he's probably unlikely to leave RB Leipzig this summer. Like I say, this is their Spurs wish list. This isn't their let's get these players list. Gvardiol, Chelsea, Man City want him, potentially worth up to 80 million euros, which was that, about 70, 71 million pounds, maybe slightly less actually, maybe in the 60s. It's a lot of money. So with him, I don't think he really wants to leave. And I'd guess if he suddenly did become available, the big boys of Man City and Chelsea, we don't know what their financial position is going to be like, but certainly City, I think, would make a move for him. He's 20 years old. He's class. He's absolutely class. And then obviously the next name on the list you go down to is Pau Torres, who we spoke about in the last video. I think Spurs will appeal to him. I think Man U are also looking at him very closely. Spurs tried to sign him last year. He turned them down. This year, very different prospect. Conte, Champions League football, all good. So we'll see what happens with him. And obviously the whole Lo Celso angle as well, with Villarreal wanting to keep Lo Celso for next season. So, if they don't go for Bastoni, I think Pau Torres is probably the one that they turn to. If they don't decide to try and wait it out for Bastoni, then I think they go for Pau Torres. And I suppose it's a battle between them and Man U. Spurs have got more probably in a football sense to offer than Man U have. Man U obviously have that little bit of the name, I guess. I guess it's a big name in football. Of course it is. There's no getting away from it. Who else we got? I think I named these last week, so I don't really want to go on them too much. Mark Guay from Palace, we know, is on the list. Gleison Bremer from Torino. That's an interesting one, obviously, because Inter want him as well. So whether Spurs just go, stuff you, and go for him, I don't know. He's a right footer, so he's a bit different, same as Guay. And Clement Longley from Barcelona, he is left footed. Turned Spurs down last year when they wanted to bring him in on loan. I think it would be probably another loan move this time if they were going to do that. So we'll see what happens there. New one for you that I learnt this week that Spurs are really closely looking at. 19-year-old Ukraine international. I want to get his name right. Illya Zabarnyi. He's very highly rated, honestly. He's, despite the fact that I've struggled to pronounce his name, he's one that a few clubs are looking at as a big potential star. 19-year-old, right footer, but he can play on either side of defence. He did sign a new long-term deal with Dynamo Kiev last summer, I think it was. Actually, no, October. 5-year deal. However, obviously, things are so unknown right now in what's happening in Ukraine. We don't know what's going to happen with their football league. We don't know what's happening with their players. It's so difficult. Obviously, with everything that's going on, football obviously is the least of the kind of things of any list of priority with what's going on in Ukraine right now. But from a football point of view, it does. It makes it kind of a bit unsure of what happens next with him. And obviously those clubs will be struggling for money as well. So, but maybe keep an eye on that one. Certainly a player that Spurs really like. Illya Zabarnyi. 19-year-old, and yes, very, very highly rated. Everyone I've kind of asked around about him, I must admit I haven't seen too much of him. I don't watch the Ukrainian league, but everyone I've spoken to about him, like scouts in the game and people like that, they all say, top class. He could be a proper talent in football. So that would tick a lot of boxes for Spurs, certainly would, and the fact that he's already an international. And we'll have European experience as well with Dynamo too. So, keep an eye on that one. So obviously, what does that mean? Players going out. We know Joe Rodon, very likely to go out. Again, some more good performances from Wales that's got everyone raving about him. I think Gareth Bale was even saying the other day, I don't know why he's not picked. He'll head off probably to a Premier League team, as I said before, hopefully on a loan rather than a permanent deal. Christian Romero's loan deal obviously will be made permanent this summer. Eric Dyer and Ben Davies, both in the last 2 years of their contracts. I'd be stunned at this point if probably, we maybe don't see new contracts of both of those in the coming months. Conte likes them both a lot. I'd be very surprised unless they decide they don't want to stick around, which would seem surprising at this point in their careers and playing for Conte. I think they'll probably be on that list for people getting new contracts rather soon, because Spurs don't want to let them get into their final year, you'd imagine. Davinson Sanchez, 26 today. Happy birthday to him. Not that he watches this or will want to watch this. But yeah, as I said before, his future kind of dependent on what offers come in for him this summer, because Conte does like him. And I do think he's really had a really consistent season. I think he's coming on really well. And Conte clearly is improving him, I think, as well. It's probably best season since his first season at the club. Then there's Japhet Tanganga, who will be back from his knee injury in pre-season. Conte will have a proper look at him, use him a lot in pre-season, as he did when he was he came in. I think it was, did I say 8 starts out of the 14 matches, maybe less matches under Conte. It might have even been 12, I can't remember. But he was used a lot, albeit because other players had injury problems. But yeah, they're going to have a look at him and then they'll make a decision probably after the career tour on him. But we mustn't forget, because Conte plays the back three, he's going to need a lot of centre-backs. And there's a lot of matches coming. So he can't really leave himself short. He needs at least 2 for each position. So this is why I think we're likely to see 2 come in the door. Because I think they needed one, and I think they're going to probably lose Rodon, let Rodon go somewhere. So yeah, I think that's about it for centre-backs that we can really talk about. So let's go on to central midfield. Central midfield, I'm going to get his name in there straight away. Oliver Skipp, just for that guy that always gets annoyed when I mention him. He is going to be fit for the first day of pre-season, which is fantastic. He's in good shape from what I understand. So he'll be back. You've got Rodrigo Bentancur, first season at Spurs, full season, which is going to be good for him in a pre-season under Conte. Still haven't seen him and Skipp together. Højbjerg, obviously, unless there's a very unexpected bid for him. He's been terrific form for Denmark. He's really carried his late season form for Spurs into the international break. One of the few players that probably has really enjoyed the international break. He's been excellent. So you got your 3 there. Obviously, Harry Winks, we know, is likely to move on. 4th choice, really, in that central midfield kind of quartet. Keep an eye on Everton, I'd say. Everton tried a couple of times to sign him in January, before and after Lampard's arrival. Lampard is a fan of Harry Winks. Obviously, Conte didn't want to let him go back in January because Spurs were having issues. We knew Skipp was having problems as well. And, Winks came in and filled in some games when there were injuries and stuff as well. So it was probably an understandable decision. And he set his stall out quite early in January. I remember Conte saying, no, I can count on him. He won't be going. But I think now is right for the player who, he'll have designs on getting into that World Cup squad potentially in the winter. So if he goes away and plays very well in the Premier League for 3-4 months, then he may well do that. So keep an eye on Everton. I think there's quite a bit of interest in him, but Everton certainly have inquired before. And obviously with Winks going, that brings a spot for someone to come in. Spurs, from what I understand, looking at more of someone that is a bit more forward-thinking than the current options. Someone that likes to get into the box a fair bit as well as do the other stuff. Look, I've said him before, but I do think Spurs will seriously look at Weston McKinney this summer. If you haven't heard me say before, Paratici spoke to his representatives in January about a potential move. Paratici adores McKinney. He brought him to Juventus. Where was it from? Was it Germany? Was it Schalke? I'm trying to remember where he came from. But he certainly is. I just want to say before I forget, people were saying last week, I was saying I couldn't remember who else had gone between Villarreal and Spurs and had this great relationship, and everyone kept saying Serge Aurier. Technically, no. Serge Aurier was released by Spurs on a free, and then a little while later ended up at Villarreal. Same with Etienne Capoue. I think he went to. Didn't he go for Watford first as well? So no, those two weren't quite right, but good guesses anyway. So Mckinney, yes, Parachi adores him, absolutely loves him, and from what I understand, he was actually above Bentancur on his January wish list for a central midfielder, from what I understand. So I think if there's a chance to bring him in, and there's certainly reports in Italy that he might be surplus to requirements there. Obviously, he had started the season really well. First half did well, and then he got, I think it was a metatarsal injury, which ruled him out for all but the last game of the season in the second half of the season. And obviously there's that, not being there much, not playing much, and the potential arrival of Pogba, it sounds like, as well. I think Juventus might be willing to let him go, and I don't think the price would be huge. I wouldn't be stunned if Spurs and Paratici look at that deal because he likes him that much. So, yeah, keep an eye on Weston McKennie. I really would. Very versatile as well. Plays box-to-box player, but he can play as an anchor man, can play further up the pitch. I think he can also fill in on the right, I think, as well. Actually, left as well. I think he can play in both flanks. Very good player. And he's still only young. Was he 23 years old as well, USA international? So, yeah, keep an eye on him. In terms of homegrown, like I say, you're losing Wink, so you're having another homegrown slot that is going. Obviously, I've said before, they've looked at James Ward-Prowse. I do wonder whether the price this summer is just too exorbitant for him. James Maddison, I know Spurs have always really liked. Tracked him. I think they were kind of in for him before he went to Leicester as well. He's a slightly different kind of player, probably slightly further up the pitch as well. It's probably one more for the next category. Calvin Phillips, I know that they've kind of considered him and kept an eye on him. Again, I think he maybe would be too expensive. If I'm Calvin Phillips, maybe looking at and thinking that, you know, that's a busy midfield, and am I going to be starting every week like I would be if I go elsewhere? Probably not. In terms of Premier League players, obviously Yves Bissouma is someone they've looked at Brighton. Obviously various kind of things with him. But yeah, he's a difficult one. He's a difficult one. Depends what the value would be for him. And I think there'd be a lot of interest in him as well. And I think obviously there's a few things in the background with him that have been going on as well. Who was the other one? Renato Sanchez. He's someone that Spurs have looked at a lot as well. Lille midfielder, Portugal international. Looks like he's probably heading to AC Milan though. I think that's one where they've just kind of been tracking him, but didn't really make any kind of big move on him as well. I've said this before, but of course there's been discussions internally about bringing Christian Eriksen back. It was interesting. I saw some of the Danish journalists getting very excited about. They did a story because Brentford had to do, their released and retained list for the Premier League, and obviously Eriksen has to be in the list of a player coming towards the end of his contract. And I think they kind of took that as, Brentford aren't keeping him, but I don't think that's entirely the case. I think Brentford still have a hope of keeping him. I think Spurs will certainly be there or thereabouts to try and bring him back. It's a free transfer. It really is a no-brainer on paper. As I've said before, this is not the Eriksen that left Tottenham. This is a very different Christian Eriksen, and one that Conte knows well. Let's talk of Man U getting involved as well. Obviously, that's slightly interesting to see how that would work. And I'm sure there will be other suitors as well that will be looking at him. Like I've said before, I understand as a preference he'd like to stay in London, if possible. So I think if Spurs do decide, I think they've got a shot. I think they do. So, yeah, we'll see where that one goes. Yuri Tielemans is one that Spurs have liked for years. Arsenal also really like him as well. Don't know whether Spurs would get in a straight shootout with Arsenal or not, purely because of the fact that Arsenal maybe could offer him week in, week out football, whereas at Spurs, a bit more of a battle for him. but obviously they can offer Champions League football. It's interesting, different players are very different in the ways they see things. Some players, they just want to be guaranteed first team. And again, I'm not saying this to Tillmans, I'm talking about players in general. Some players want to be guaranteed their starting spot every week. Some of them really like that fight and they feel it brings the best out of them. So different players do react in different ways to that as well. In terms of outgoings, of course, we know Giovanni Lo Celso, like I say, Villarreal linked with him. I think there's a couple of other La Liga clubs looking at him as well. His loan spell did him and Spurs favour. Of course it did. He played very well. I'm wearing very bright today. There's a lot of light coming in this room. So apologies if I look like I'm kind of like a... Oh, there you go. Just as I say that, of course, the light changes. I think there's probably some setting on my camera I need to adjust to stop that happening. So apologies if you suddenly see me going light and dark and light and dark. Who was I talking about? I've completely forgotten. Oh, yes, of course, Giovanni Lo Celso. Lo Celso did himself and Spurs favours by having a really good loan spell with Villarreal, obviously helping them get to semi-finals of Champions League. So with him, I think there'll be decent interest and I think they'll be able to get a reasonable fee for him. They're never going to get what they paid for him because I think in all it was like 55 million or something, or certainly what they were meant to pay for him. Don't know how much of it has been paid off. Tongi and Ndombele, of course, it's not as easy, I don't think, to move him on, which is such a shame because he's such a talented player. But obviously his loan spell at Lyon did not work as well at all. There's been some talk about various clubs looking at him, a few of the other clubs, but I think they'll all look at the situation and they'll probably go, well, we can probably come in with a bit of lower offer, can't we? And it'll be up to Spurs, I guess, to see whether they just cut their losses and what they do, because he's not likely to be part of Conte's plans, is he? Let's be honest. It would take the most incredible renaissance that the world has seen, probably, for that to happen. So, yeah. And, of course, for the people that always ask him, Pape Matar, yes, very funny. As some of you doing it because I said about it last week. Pape Matar, as I said lots of times, he'll come back. Spurs will have a little look at him unless they get a really perfect loan deal lined up early. Otherwise, they'll look at him early. They'll look at him in the pre-season, see where he's at physically, what he still needs to do, whether he's ready for the Premier League, and then potentially, obviously, the ideal would be to send him to a Premier League club to get used and adapt to the league as quickly as possible. Or the other side is you look at a similar league to the Premier League, and that may well be, let's say, Germany is probably the closest you'll get in European football when he plays in the Bundesliga. But see what happens with him. I don't need to tell you about his loan season because I spoke about that at length before. Let's move on to attacking midfielders. I already mentioned Maddison, obviously, as one. I think he'd be a lot of money. And I don't think Leicester would want to let him go. But we'll talk about him a little bit because I think I've got some little notes I'd written on him. So obviously, Spurs are quite strong in this area. They are. They've got, obviously, the wonderful Son Heung-min. They've got Dejan Kulusevski, who's made such a huge impact. They've got Lucas Moura and they've got Steven Bergwijn. And obviously, Perisic has come in, who can play on either flank as well. Bergwijn, we know, wants to go. He's now very publicly stated that. He's not going anywhere, though, until Ajax pay the money that Tottenham want. And Tottenham are looking for pretty much as close to their £27 million they spent on him back. Was it PSV in January 2020? That's not happening until Ajax really kind of pay what he's worth. And the fact he's been so good on Netherlands duty, I don't think has helped Ajax whatsoever as well, because he's just kind of proving that he's a very good player, and you're not going to get him on the cheap. Bryan Hill, obviously, has completed his Valencia loan, probably likely to go out again, let's be honest. And we'll see what happens with him. We know Conte is unconvinced about his ability to handle the physical side of the Premier League. So they're the potential outgoings in that position. You can never rule out a bid for someone like Lucas Moura. But I think he's even said himself, he did an interview the other day, maybe back in Brazil, where he was saying that he feels that he's likely to stay at Spurs and Spurs want him to stay and all of this. So, I said this before, I think as a squad player, I think Lucas is really good for what Spurs kind of need. And I don't think he's a starter anymore. I don't. I think he will start certain games because there are so many. But I do think, whoever comes in will probably be brought in as another person potentially in front of him. And like I say, I think Perisic probably is ahead of him if they wanted to push him on from the wing-back slots. But as a squad player coming off the bench, I think Lucas it can be a game changer. I do think he can. So let's look at potential incomings. We're talking about not only the flanks, but also players that can play centrally as well as like a number 10 type. So I know Spurs have been looking at Lyon's Lucas Paqueta, Brazilian international. He's one you probably know his name. If you don't watch French football, you'll probably know his name because Newcastle have tried a couple of times to sign him. Very good player, 24-year-old. He can play, like I say, in that number 10 role. He can play a bit deeper in a more central role. He can play on the right as well, and actually can also play up front if required as well. His stats have written him down: 11 goals and 7 assists in a Lyon side that wasn't great last season. You know, I had to obviously keep an eye on them with the whole Ndombele stuff, and they finished outside the European places. Didn't have a great season, but his stats still weren't too bad. Of course, there's another Brazilian international that Spurs have been linked with, which is Richarlison, Everton's Richarlison. I did some stuff on him yesterday because it was all suddenly got very excited. People were saying, oh, you know, advanced and terms agreed and all this sort of stuff. And again, I had to come in and say, look, from what I understand, Paratici really likes him. He's another one of Paratici's list of players he likes. There's a long list, you know. There's a lot of footballs out there, and Paratici has been this kind of transfer guru figure for a long time. So he's got a lot of players he likes, and I know it sounds like I'm saying Paratici likes him and him and him and him, but that's the case. Where it's like scouts. Scouts have got hundreds of players that they really like. Whenever I speak to one of those, they're always telling me so many players they like. So yeah, he likes Richarlison. However, from what I understand, nothing happened with that at this moment. I'm not saying it isn't something that Spurs look at later in the window, because there is interest there. I must stress there is interest there. But yeah, maybe something for later in the window when they're kind of looking at the priorities and options. They've looked at him a few windows in the past, but it hasn't really been a priority position at that point. It was really interesting because I wrote my article yesterday on him, and I had certain people coming out on Twitter and saying, oh, David Ornstein and Alistair Gold contradicting each other. And I looked at what David Ornstein, who's a brilliant journalist, had written, and I looked at what I'd written. We were saying the same thing. We were both saying that he's a player that Spurs are interested in, but nothing happening at the moment, and maybe one for the end of the window or later in the window. So I can only presume what's happened is the aggregator accounts put out a line from my article, but then obviously the way they work, they don't link my article underneath. Occasionally they do, but on the whole they don't. So people are just seeing out of context line from it without seeing, I guess, how it's actually written in the rest of the article. So I guess that's where the whole contradiction and things come from. But now David Ornstein's a lovely guy. He's such a really nice guy. We chat from time to time. He's a very nice chat and a brilliant journalist with terrific contacts in the game. He really is. We talk about saying earlier about how we source our stories, and yeah, David Ornstein has got a superb network of contacts. And that's the way to do it. It isn't just talking to a club and asking, is this true? That's not how it works. Which is, yeah. But there you go. So Richarlison. With him, there's a few other interesting factors as well. There's the Winks element. Like I said before, Everton have always been, or certainly in the recent past, have been interested in Harry Winks. So there's that angle to play on. I think the price that there's been spoken about at the moment, I think would be one that many clubs would probably veer a bit away from. Let's talk about like 50 million plus for him, which, look, I think once you cut out the theatrics that come with Richarlison, there's a good player there. There is, and he's a very versatile player. He can play on the left or the right, and also when Dominic Calvert-Lewin was out of action, and also I think when he came back originally, Richarlison was playing up front as the front man. So yeah, that's versatile, and that for Spurs, that ticks a few boxes. But 50 million, that's a lot. That's a lot for him. He's 25-year-old. It's actually been really good for Brazil. I think he's got a really good record in the last 3 or 4 games I was looking at. He missed a few with an injury, the previous internationals. 10 goals, 5 assists in 30 matches in let's be honest, a very struggling Everton side. But yeah, the other interesting part to it, and why I say the 50 million is going to be too much really, it's because he's only got 2 years left on his contract. And this, when we look at the other side of football as well, which I hopefully try to bring you a bit of an insight into, he's represented by CAA Base, massive agency, and there's links there galore. So Spurs have got a really good relationship with CAA Base. I think I might have mentioned this in the past. Lots of players that have come through Spurs doors have been CAA Base. Carl Walker Peters, Dele Alli. So obviously Dele Alli, again, another Everton connection there as well. Another player that they will potentially earn money for Spurs. I think it's 20 starts he has to make. Someone told me the other day, 20 starts until Spurs get some money for him, which obviously only made one last game of the season. CAA Base represent him. They represent Richarlison. They represent Frank Lampard as well. And like I say, a very good relationship with Spurs. So you can see the little network there as well. Interesting little aside. I must admit, I did not know this until this week. I was speaking to an agent, and it's been a week of it. I've been speaking to loads of agents this week because, well, it's a transfer window, what it does. But one of them said to me, and I must admit, I never knew this, agents only have a 2-year contract. That's the maximum they can have with their players, their clients. I didn't know that. Apparently, that's why you see so much turmoil and so many transfers because, look, let's be honest, there's a lot of agents out there have such a good relationship with their client, they just renew every 2 years, and they're not likely to go elsewhere. But maybe agents that aren't quite so good, or maybe slightly different kinds of agents, they will come to a player and go, come with me, I'll make you a star, come with me, I'll get you that big move and stuff like that. And that's why I think there's maybe this interesting relationship with clubs and agents and players, and I think a lot of it comes from that 2-year thing. It almost instigates instability. Honestly, I don't know how I've gone this long without knowing that. There's a couple of other journalists I was mentioning that to who were surprised by it as well. And it does. It's a very odd way of. There must be a reason for it, but it does create this atmosphere where the agent has to deliver, or the agent has to make as much money as they can from a player before they lose them. And that money, most money, will come from a transfer. I find it fascinating. You know, pretty much every agent that I deal with, I get the impression their clients' interests are the best interests are what are at heart. They're not money grabbing types, and I think you see that with the various players they represent. I know quite a few of the agents that represent Spurs players, and you can see they're not really players that agitate for moves and stuff like that. And I find that really, it's interesting. The whole agency world is very interesting. But I just thought that the whole 2-year thing, little thing, you may have all known that. I'm just telling you old news. But there you go. So Richarlison. So that's him. We'll see what happens with him. Other Premier League players, obviously Spurs, we know Parachi likes, and Spurs like Alan St. Maximin, I've mentioned before, at Newcastle. Adama Traore at Wolves as well, who obviously went off to Barcelona, and after an electric first few weeks, wasn't the most successful loan in the world. With him, my reservations about him, but I would say contract-wise, I think he's in his last year now, so who knows? They may revisit that, but I think there's better options out there. But that's just me. In terms of homegrown, I mentioned James Maddison. They've looked at him before. Only 2 years left on his deal at the moment, so maybe Leicester have a decision to make on him. Brennan Johnson, I've mentioned before as well. They really like him, Nottingham Forest lad. I'd imagine now, with Forest going up, that he would probably be mad to move on right now. I think if I was him, I'd probably keep going, see how you do in the Premier League with Forest. 19 goals and 9 assists, and he was playing on the wing. He played up front for them as well at times as well. Really, really good young player. I said before, Spurs spoke to Jesse Lingard's representatives back in January about a potential summer move because he's a free agent. I get the impression that it'll either be a move abroad or West Ham for him. I think for him it's about getting week in, week out football. And again, I don't know if Spurs offer that. You never know, but I still feel they're not really going to offer that. Gareth Bale, of course, will continually be asked about. But like I've said before, spoken to people in his camp, spoken to people at Spurs, and everyone, same kind of voice, very unlikely. And I think a lot of that comes from the Conte way of playing, because I do think he would break Bale. Unfortunately, I still believe. I think Cardiff City. I think that'll end up being the one for him. I saw the Getafe stuff that came out in the week, and Bale absolutely slammed that, which was that was interesting. And in terms of at Spurs, 17-year-old Alfie Devine likely to go out on loan. Very, very talented young man he is. Hopefully he'll go on and really develop. Kulusevski's obviously, Spurs looks like they're going to take up the second loan option rather than do a permanent one this year, because obviously they then can put more money towards other stuff. But I'm pretty sure over the course of this year he will meet the objective to make it permanent anyway. And hopefully just going to be such a huge star. He really could. So that's attacking midfield. Like I say, there will be other names that will come to pass, I'm sure. And then striker, we know about Harry Kane. We've said that before. Happy now, looking forward to the future. Spurs continue to show this ambition in the next month or so. Open to talks over a new contract when he comes back to pre-season, which is class. The key, though, obviously, will be making sure that he's not knackered next season. It's a big season. They're going to need him for the Champions League. Whereas maybe, in different European competitions, might have been the chance to rest him if you had another striker. But Champions League, you're probably going to want to play him in almost every game. And last season, he played the most minutes out of any player. I think more so than even Hugo Lloris. And they can't afford that because, he may be a little bit lucky last year that he didn't get any injuries, really any bad injuries. So they got to look after him, and that means bringing in another striker, or at least someone who is versatile enough to fill that role as well. I've said the names before, so I'm not going to go into them too much in the striker position. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, obviously, is a player Spurs have looked at in the past, but I think A, price, B, his want to play regularly will make that a struggle. Gabriel Jesus at Man City, we know he's likely to leave. Again, I think Arsenal may be favourites there because week in, week out football. And I don't think Spurs can offer that, although they can offer the Champions League. Victor Osimhen, I've said before. He's class, but I think you're talking big, big money there. And again, he's got a decision to make of whether he'd want to come and play slightly less regular football to what he is. Alexander Isak, I've said before, Real Sociedad. Who else has said was on the list? Darwin Núñez has been on the list for a while, but of course looks like Liverpool bound, and he's going to be absolutely class, I think. Scored a lot of goals for Benfica, 34 in 41 matches. Patrick Schick was another player on the list. Leverkusen, Czech Republic striker, but he's since signed a new contract, so that's a no-go for anyone. And of course, Lautaro Martinez, I mentioned earlier. Conte and Paratici, big fans of his. I think they'll keep an eye on what happens with his situation, because if Dybala and Lukaku are coming in, where does that leave Martinez? Might make it a little bit difficult to keep him. I think he's got a lot of suitors out there. He only did sign a new deal last year. But I think Spurs would be in the mix for him. I do. I think, with Conte as well as the pull there, and I think he's such a good quality player. I think he would ensure that he was getting a lot of football as well, and that competition up front would be ridiculous. It would be so good. Maybe keep an eye on what happens with him at Inter and their finances. Certain free agents I know that Paratici kind of veered clear of, like Dybala, just mentioned. Andrea Bellotti as well. Another one that I don't believe either of those players Paratici was fully convinced are probably right for what they're doing right now at Spurs and the Conte way, despite their experience. And then there will be others. Again, there will be others. They'll be looking for young, talented players as well that potentially can push on and become big players going forward. So they'll be scouring that market in terms of what they got. Like I said before, Dane Scarlett probably like to go out on loan next season, which would be really good for his development. Troy Parrott and Keanu Tete at the moment looks like loans again. I'd really like him to have a proper look at Troy Parrott. I mean, Keanu Tete, funnily enough, fits his ideal kind of number 9 really well. So it'd be interesting to see if he has a proper look at him in pre-season, because very good couple of loans at Northampton and Cheltenham for him. With Troy Parrott as well, I feel like he really pushed on in the second this half of the season. MK Dons, he was superb and real big part of their playoff push. Scored another really good goal for Real Madrid, I was going to say. Republic of Ireland last night. Got onto the end of a very clever ball, headed it past the keeper. He's really flying with his development right now. So I'm hoping, because I think his contract hasn't got a lot left, maybe last 2 years. I'm trying to think how long he's got, but I'd hope Spurs renew that contract. And I'd hope, that's if obviously he wants to, and I'd hope that Conte has a proper look at him, maybe take him out to Korea, not just on a lad's holiday, but, it's part of the tour, and has a proper look at what he could provide as maybe another striker within the ranks with all the games to come. Because, there are going to be a lot of opportunities, and you probably could have 3 strikers up there, because I don't get the impression he wants to use Sonny as a lone front man. Kind of saw Bergwijn in that role, and Bergwijn is going. So I do wonder whether he keeps, and he had Scarlett as that third potential young, if this was third, if you're going to put him behind Bergwijn. But obviously if Scarlett goes out on loan, I wonder whether he keeps perhaps Troy or Guillon, or one of them, if they don't sign 2 strikers, as just that youth option in case of an emergency or something, and maybe plays in like the Carabao Cup and things like that. I hope he has a proper look at Troy, because I think he's done superbly this season. I think we're at the end of the squad. I think we've done everything. I hope I haven't missed anyone out. Anyone obvious, anyway. Hopefully that was thorough and comprehensive. Like I say, look, there will be players that will emerge, links that will report. Paratici's knowledge of the European game is ridiculous. It is, honestly, the guy was 11 years at Juventus, and especially the free transfer market. He's such an expert at free transfers and also loan to buy deals. He will have so many, his list will be huge. I've given you certain players that I know are on these lists, but there will be other ones that maybe enter it because their opportunities arise. There will be young players and stuff like that. So there will be more. That is not the be all and end all, which is great, because I want to learn about new players as well that maybe I'm not too aware of. So there you go. I think that's everything right now. The way this transfer window has moved, I may finish this video and there may have been developments while I'm doing I'm up to an hour and 8 minutes almost now. So in that time, something else might have broken. But yeah, the sun is shining. People are mowing their lawns out there. I can hear them. I want to get out and enjoy the sunshine. So I'm going to head off. And if something else is broken, don't worry. I'm going to, like I said, I'm trying to do 2 videos a week if possible, because of pretty much the fast-moving nature of the transfer window. I do have a couple of days off next week. Next week you might miss out on one in the middle, depending on how things are going and what time I've got. I'll try and squeeze one in. But if not, I'll be back hopefully the following weekend, and we'll have some more positive things to talk about. Like I say, Jed Spence, I think there will be developments on his future in the next, early this week is probably the best way to say it. And I'm sure there'll be other players as well. There'll start to be movement on as that international break comes to a close. I think that is going to make a big difference. You're going to see a lot of clubs suddenly become busy because of that. But we are in it. The transfer window has opened. It opened on Friday, and we crack on. So there you go. That's it. I'm knackered. That was a lot of talking. I was trying to talk really quickly as well through a lot of that to make sure I packed it all in. So I'm going to head off into the sunshine now. Enjoy the rest of your days. That's not like the end of your life. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I shall catch you later. Look after yourself. Stay healthy. Stay safe. And I shall catch you later. Goodbye.